Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Unless Sarah tells me to wait another minute, but I think I don't see anybody else trickling in. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Harvey-Martin. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Thank you for joining me this morning. Okay, let me pull up. I'm pretty familiar with Zoom. I was teaching virtually and in person on Zoom for about this whole year. So I've got the Q&A pulled up. Feel free to message during if you have questions, and hopefully I will see it. And if not, my goal is to leave time at the end. So those of you who don't know me, or at least you may know me under the name Michelle Harvey. I've been around the Angelman Syndrome Foundation under that name for a while. I am a sibling. My brother, I have two younger brothers. The youngest one, Matt, has Angelman syndrome. And he is 26 years old and lives with my parents. I live in the San Diego area, about 15 minutes from my parents, and I see him all the time. I am a special education teacher, again, in the San Diego, Southern California area. I am also a board certified behavior analyst, which is the BCBA, couple of letters. If you are not familiar with that terminology, that is, falls under the umbrella of applied behavior analysis. And so I'm very familiar with behavior and everything that goes along with it, and looking at behavior. I choose to be in the classroom and use my BCBA as a special education teacher because I love being in the classroom. I'm coming up on my 8th year teaching. We're starting, we've got one more week of summer and then we're starting. So I've been in the classroom getting everything ready. Let's see what else. I currently teach grades 3 through 5 in an autism special day class. And so today we're focusing on all things IEPs. If you are new, I'll explain that a little bit. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. I'm worried I'm going to talk a little bit too fast because we only have an hour, and I tried to kind of cram in past conferences. I've done two sessions, kind of a basics and then a medium level one, but I kind of tried to put it all in one here. I forgot to mention, I'm a member of the ASF Family Resource Team. And so you can reach out through the resource team website. You can also write down my email directly here. It's on this slide. It'll also be on the end slide. And remember that as a member of that team, I'm here for you to talk individual questions out. If you want more information about anything in this presentation, we can talk through that. We can talk about more individual situations, what your school is doing, what your child or student is doing, how I can help, things like that. I can look over IEPs, all sorts of things like that. So remember that I'm here for you, and a lot of the questions or scenarios or things that I bring up in this presentation is as a result of working with families across the US for the last however many years, kind of looking at IEPs and talking all things school related. So I am here for you. So let's get started. I always like to put a little picture of my family and my brother here. This is if anybody has been following me or seen my presentation from last summer. I was scheduled to get married on April 11th of 2020. And, we had the marriage license and certificate ready to go. Everything got shut down. So we ended up doing a little backyard Zoom ceremony, and you can see behind the scenes pictures of it here. In the top picture, that's my dad got ordained a couple days before online. He performed the ceremony. We did it on Zoom like this for our guests. And then this bottom picture is kind of a little bit of a nicer picture of that's Matt and I. He's about, I feel like, a whole head taller than I am, and he still is, obviously. The redo ceremony is in the middle of September. So we've got about another month and a half, and then we're going to do everything again. that is just a little fun snippet into our lives, and then a good picture of Matt and I. I don't have any other pictures from recent because we haven't gone on any other adventures recently. Okay, so today we are going to review the basic content in the IEP. Again, if you're new here, if your child is younger, welcome to this wonderful world of special education. Please don't be overwhelmed and frustrated by anything today. Remember, take everything in, just absorb it, and reach out when you're ready to talk about it. If you have more questions, things like that. So we're going to review the basic content in the IEP. I want you to, okay, Marilyn, I see your question. I'll cover that at the end. Okay. Okay, we're going to review the basic content. We're going to become familiar with how goals and objectives are developed. I want you to leave with a better understanding of the content of the IEP document itself, so that you can be a more active and comfortable participant in the meeting itself. That's really my goal, is to just, if you get anything from this presentation, be more comfortable advocating and just knowing what you're looking at when you look at the document, when you're having those discussions with the IEP team. I also put in a little bit of a discussion at the end about like how to get more. One of the most frequent questions that I'm asked is, how do I get a one-on-one aid? Or how do I get a communication device, or, basically how to get more. And so we're going to talk about a couple generic tips and tricks to get you started on that. Okay. I have also put in these little purple arrows as we go throughout that are like extra advocacy tips. And so you'll kind of see those pop up. I'll review that briefly. So just wanted to point that out. Don't be surprised when you see this purple arrow. Okay. All right. So again, if you're new here, real basics of the legal stuff. Okay. The Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, IDEA, is the key legislation where all of this special education law comes from. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but I just want you to know and be aware of the certain buzz words that you're going to hear. Okay. Individualized Education Plan is IEP. So every student that is receiving special education services, whether it's somebody with Angelman syndrome, somebody with autism, all the way to kind of, all ends of the special education spectrum. There are some students that only are receiving speech services on an IEP. All of them have an IEP, and it's the cornerstone document. It tells who, what, where, when, why, how. It's basically your kind of mini Bible for that student. Okay. That IEP provides the framework for what a free, appropriate public education, again, those are buzzwords straight from the law, what a free, appropriate public education is in the least restrictive environment for that student. So the goal is least restrictive environment. Again, you're going to hear that buzzword a lot as you're going through this educational journey. The least restrictive environment for every student is different. And so that's why there's not going to be a general rule. We can kind of talk about and have that discussion too. The law does explicitly state that parents and family are equal members of the IEP process and decision-making team. And so I just like to point that out. If you are feeling intimidated, having a harder time speaking up, or not, just not comfortable participating in some of these meetings, or kind of getting, not liking how you're being treated maybe by the IEP team or the school team, know that the law supports you and the law backs you up, that you are an equal member of the IEP process and decision-making team. Okay. All right. So moving past the legality stuff of it, the major components of the IEP. Okay. So you've got, starting at the top left, identification, eligibility information. That's usually at least one page in the front. You've got a parent concern section. This should be in every IEP. In California IEPs, it's a little blurb on the second page. We leave it blank. In typical IEPs, we leave it blank, and then at the meeting, we ask the parents, we type in as we go. I have also had parents choose to type up their concerns prior to the meeting and send them to me, and I can copy and paste it into that. We have also had parents choose to add more after the meeting. And so we end the meeting. One of the to-do items will be Okay, just, this is basically a place to get your concerns documented. And so if you wanted to, you could send that to the team based on how the meeting went. If you wanted, here are our concerns. We want to make sure they're documented in this IEP document. So that should be in every IEP. Then you have the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, okay, commonly referred to as present levels. We're going to spend a little bit more time on that. Then from that, you derive the goals and objectives. From there, you should have services and supports listed in the IEP. From there, we also have accommodations and modifications to curriculum, to anything in the school environment, really. I'm not going to spend time on this otherwise, and so I just want to point out accommodations are different than modifications. They do get looped together often, but accommodations help the student access that A and that A. Accommodations access something in the school environment. So whether that's preferential seating because they have a hearing impairment, whether that's a certain vision, and so they always need to have either be looking at the teacher or the screen in a certain way or something like that. Things like adaptive paper or a slant board, those are all accommodations that's helping you access the school environment and the curriculum and the lessons. Modification is a modification to the content that the student is learning. So if they're not at grade level, they will often be getting modified curriculum. For our students on alternate assessment, which is all the students that I teach, and most likely your child with Angelman syndrome, they will likely be on alternate assessment and therefore be accessing a modified curriculum. That doesn't mean we're not teaching them some of the grade level standards and topics, whether it's math, science. It just means that they're accessing, no, I shouldn't use that word because that's a combination. The content that they're accessing might be modified. We might not be going as in depth as the whole standard, 5th grade standard says, something like that. Okay, then you also are going to have special factors, a couple of sections. This is usually a behavior intervention plan. If they are getting transportation services, things like that, extended school year, which is the summer school component, that will all be listed usually towards the end of the IEP. And then you also have signature pages. Since I don't touch on this later, I want to just kind of briefly touch on it now. There should be different sections where you can sign in for your signature pages. There's usually basically an attendance line that you would sign, that you were there, you participated in the meeting. Separate from that is usually a consent, where you're consenting to the IEP. So for example, if we're having a lengthy discussion, but we're running out of time, we need to schedule a part 2. Everybody will sign participation for today, but parents are not signing consent because they're not consenting to that IEP yet. They would then sign consent after we are, concluding and we've made all of the changes that we want to. Okay, if there's other questions about that, I can come back to that too at the end. Okay, so I really want to focus in on these 3 sections, the present levels, the annual goals, and the services and supports, because it really should, the IEP should tell a story, for lack of a better word, of everything that is happening with that student. The present levels are describing their strengths, their weaknesses. It should be really, I, as a teacher, and I've had to do this many times, will get a new student from another district, from another state, and all I have to go off of is that IEP document itself. So that IEP should be very detailed, where I, as a new teacher, can pick it up, can go, okay, I'm going to have this and this ready for them. We're going to structure their day like this. They're not often that detailed, but we do our best. Okay, so that's why present levels really should be beefed up and have a lot of information in there. We're going to go more in depth into each of these sections. Okay, from that, you derive what the annual goals should be. It says what the school team will be working on with the student for the next year. From that, we get services and supports. It should be really apparent from what those goals are, that how instruction towards those goals will be provided. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at the present level section. Okay, present levels are a written description of both academic and functional performance. It should say the strengths, what the student can do, should say some weaknesses, what we're still working on. It should say what situations we are more likely to perform better in, what prompting levels have been most successful, what has worked, what has not worked. just kind of everything of where we are. It needs to be current, should be within the last year, and it should include multiple sources of data and information. So that means observations from working with the student, hard data, which means numbers and percentages on 5 out of 10 trials, times that we tried this matching activity, or that we went through the lunch line, they needed help this amount of times. That hard data and that numbers it makes sure that it's objective and not subjective information. Half of the time they do this, or, we really want those numbers so that it's not just opinions and this flowery kind of paragraph writing of what the student can do. We want, on a behavior checklist, they did this, this, and this based on the modified bridge assessment that you may hear referenced in the communication sessions, or, things like that. All of that information should be in there. Okay, here's a little extra advocacy tip. If you are feeling generally comfortable with kind of the present levels and know what you're looking for, make sure you analyze the present level section. Think about other questions you could ask the team to get more information. What does instruction look like when you're working on reading? How do you, again, this is not in a confrontational way. This is just if you're trying to gather more information and want to make sure you are being, you have all of the information needed to be an informed member of the IEP team, to be able to advocate a little bit more, and really analyze. And if you don't see numbers, say, could you go, try this, on each day of this week that you try this certain skill, how many times are they doing it? What kind of prompting are they, things like that. That would be kind of an extra little advocacy tip, is to really read and analyze the paragraphs that you're seeing in all of your spare time, I know, as parents, right? Okay, so next, let's go to the annual goals. Okay, so again, from the present level section, it should be really apparent what goals are needed. Okay, whether we're communication, reading, writing, where, it should be really easy to figure out from there what our weaknesses are, where we're not, like where we are right now, and kind of what this next step is to get even stronger in a certain area. Goals need to be measurable. Okay, so there's the, the numbers, the data, they need to be attainable, which means that it needs to be not so far off that the student can't accomplish this in the next IEP year. Okay, so if we're doing, I shouldn't elaborate too much. It just needs to just make sure that it's not like, oh, we're going to be doing this skill totally independently, and yet right now we're at this level where we need a lot of help. Well, maybe it's not attainable to do that totally independently in this year. For this year, let's focus on only getting to, we only need a couple verbal prompts, and then the next year maybe we would only get to then we would get to doing it independently, things like that. They also need to be specific. Don't let the school team leave this so general that they're, oh, we're, this is how we work on reading. We're doing reading in this way, but you have no idea what it actually looks like when your student is participating in reading, and what that, reading and literacy instruction looks like. This is a little bit more of a legal term. The goals must meet the child's needs that result from the disability, and then that are helping the child to be involved in and make progress in the general curriculum. And so that is, you can interpret that statement in many ways. I just like to have this in there because that is kind of something that the law states as well. Okay, so a little bit of detail on terminology. Goals are usually, goal is kind of the shorthand for annual goals that are worked on for the entire year. Okay, if you hear objectives, usually we're referring to shorter term goals that are accompanying the annual goals. We also call these short-term objectives. Having these short-term objectives, or the inclusion of them on the IEP, often varies from district to district, state to state, The most common thing that I see, so again, I've taught in a couple districts in Southern California. I started in Tennessee. I got my master's in there. So I have taught in 2 different states. In addition, I've seen IEPs through my work with the ASF from all over the United States. And the most common thing that I see is students that are taking the alternate assessment are usually required to have those short-term objectives. Personally, it doesn't change how I teach the student to have those objectives on there. It just helps delineate for the parents, I think, a little bit more of like, here's the steps that it's going to take that I envision in my knowledge of the student, the steps that it will take to get to that goal, to get to meeting that annual goal. So for example, extra advocacy tip. So analyze the objective section. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, just what that could look like. Oftentimes, I will see or inherit IEPs or see objectives that personally don't make sense. The criteria is too similar to the annual goal. Like it's not a clear stepwise, this is how we would meet this goal. Let me explain a little bit more what I mean, okay? If you had an annual goal of adding numbers 1 through 20, okay? So maybe we're adding with manipulatives, we could be using a calculator, we could be, again, very dependent on the individual student's level, but this is just a general idea. If the annual goal is, I want the student to be able to add numbers 1 through 20, 2 plus 4 equals 6, things like that. For the first trimester, we do our short-term objectives in trimesters. They may be quarterly, they may be, every 6 weeks or something like that. However, the district has those kind of benchmark times laid out. The first short-term objectives, okay, I'm working on the student adding with manipulatives. So that means like blocks or counters or our favorite, little teddy bear things. We're using those visuals. We don't just have the numbers memorized. We're adding with manipulatives, just the numbers 1 through 10. Okay, so all we're working on is getting those numbers 1 through 10 and mastering that. Ideally, as the teacher, I'm writing this IEP, ideally, I think we will be able to master that in the first trimester. And then you would get that report or the progress report detailing if we've met that goal or not, or if we still have to work on it. But at the annual IEP, you put in, this is the steps that I think that we can get to this goal. Then after that, ideally we master that. Now we're going to work on adding 1 through 15. Okay, so we're incorporating a couple extra numbers. We're still working on that 1 through 10. I'm putting in here, we're using manipulatives. So we're still working on having that visual to help us. We don't have the math facts memorized yet. That might be another step, another year. Okay, so we work 1 through 15. And then the next step in that is adding those other 5 numbers in. The last objective would be adding manipulatives with the numbers 1 through 20. Okay, and so there's your annual goal, the stepwise that you've reached. Here's another example in a little bit of a more functional routine. This is an adaptive behavior goal, vocational skills goal. Say the annual goal is to complete the lunch routine independently. Okay, so I'm talking about getting in line, say whether it's bringing your lunch from home, whether it's getting it from the cafeteria. I'm going to use cafeteria as the example. Standing in line, getting the tray, pointing or picking which food you want, getting it on your plate, waiting in line, entering usually it's a PIN number. Sometimes they have the kids scan their ID card, however they do it, and then going to your seat. Okay, those are all of the steps to this routine. So the first, I ideally want the student to be able to do this independently. Okay, the first objective I might be working on is using a visual of those steps. So there's an adult next to them saying, with the reminder, or there's posters up that are like, okay, first step, we're in line. Now we get our tray. Now we get our plate, all of those steps. Using that visual, can they complete the lunch routine with verbal prompts? Okay, so just only verbal prompts from the person next to them. Then once and that might be combined with gestural prompts too. If we are still in the beginning stages of learning this skill, then maybe for the second trimester, okay, we have mastered that. Hopefully we mastered it sooner than the whole trimester because we've had a lot of those prompts, but you never know. It always, growth is different for every student. What I predict, how long I predict that they might be able to master the skill. It may take shorter, it may take longer. It's kind of a fluid thing. The next step would be in this middle box here, using that visual. Are we completing the lunch routine with only gestural prompts? Okay, so then we take away our verbal prompting and we might just need the reminder of, that's kind of the saying, oh, nope, you forgot your plate. Make sure you get your plate. Maybe we only need 1 or 2 gestural prompts, ideally. Then can we complete that lunch routine with only the visual task list? So with only that present, the student is learning to look back at this, and we're getting, those are the steps to kind of get that lunch routine done a little bit more independently. So I hope that gives you an idea of just kind of some ideas to be thinking about how you can analyze the objectives a little bit more within those annual goals. Again, school districts oftentimes will require them to be written a certain way or a different way or things like that. And so there are many things that could impact this, but I hope that helps you with a little bit more of an understanding of that. Okay, let me take a sip of water. Okay, and looking at IEP goals themselves and the wording, okay? So these are this is word for word, obviously minus the student's name, from IEPs that I have written in the past. And I just like to point this out there, by February 26, 2019, given a phrase or sentence composed of known sight words, the student will independently match the phrase or sentence to a corresponding image with 90% accuracy on 3 consecutive data collection days as measured by staff data collection. Who talks like that, right? However, we are required, this is everything that we have to put in these IEPs to make them, it's a legally defensible IEP if we have all of these components in. That's more of an academic one. Here's a little bit more of a functional, vocational skills, adaptive behavior, things like that. By October 2019, given a variety of common lunch or classroom containers, the student will open 5 containers with only 1 verbal prompt as measured across 3 consecutive data collection days by teacher data collection. So this is one we were working on with the student as part of their fine motor goal, things like that. So I want to go over how we write these goals and what all the pieces are so that you can help, it helps you know what you're listening to, know all the parts of them that we are required to have in there. Okay, so I don't expect parents to have this memorized or anything like that. I just want you to understand a little bit more all of the pieces that go into this so that you can advocate more if one piece doesn't look right, okay? So the kind of formula for it is given some sort of condition, okay? So this is in what situation do we expect the student to perform the behavior? Is this only during lunch routine? Is this, given that in that lunch routine goal example, given the visuals, so we know that visual task list is always going to be there, given this condition, how do we expect them to perform the behavior? Okay, so next section, the student will, what is the exact behavior or performance that we are expecting to see? What is the behavior that somebody could observe to see their performance on this goal? Okay, so that's they'll match this, they'll use their device to say this, or they'll use total communication to participate like this. They're going to be attending more to the read aloud by eye contact with it and by making comments on their device or their system, all sorts of things like that. Okay, then with how much accuracy, prompts. So how independent are we expecting the student to be in performing this skill, or how many correct will we know that they've mastered this goal? Okay, so this is the same thing as you get 90% on your math test, you get an A in general education classes. This is just taking that accuracy level and putting it in the goal here. Then our next section, which is where I think it's a little bit tricky, with what consistency are we expecting to see this behavior? Okay, so how frequently do we expect them? I'm just going to use 90% on the math test. How frequently do we expect them to get 90% so that we know they've mastered the goal? Was it a fluke if we got 9 out of 10 right that day because we happened to guess right? Or over time, as we do it consistently, we know that they've mastered that goal. So we usually need to see it multiple times. which is why we have multiple math tests, or like the, in general education classrooms, there's that quiz halfway through, then there's the test, then I know they've mastered that goal, things like that. Okay. Then this as measured by is, how are we taking or reporting data on this goal? For our students that are on alternate assessment, usually have a lot of support needs and things like that. It's usually going to be, I think my kind of standard thing is teacher staff observation and data collection. However, there's flexibility. Are you going to use a certain standardized checklist to be reporting on the goal? And that's how you are like measuring their progress. Or for students that are participating more in the general education curriculum, are we looking at, based on their chapter reading test, that's how we're reporting on this data, things like that. And then, by the date, when do we expect them to master this goal? So that's helping show you, is this an annual one? Is this a short-term objective? Things like that. Keep in mind that the order of these doesn't necessarily have to always be in this order. I think my district is actually in the habit of, we have the date first, so then we know it's annual. We do, by October 2019, given, student will, things like that. We kind of put that at the beginning. That is a little bit more semantics and not, not super important, but I hope this helps you look at and be able to kind of decipher, the pieces that you're seeing in the goals. If pieces are missing, maybe you see if they would add it in there. It is possible, this doesn't have to all be one run-on sentence. You could break it up into 2 sentences. I've gotten pretty good at wordsmithing it so that it can just be one long sentence, just for ease of looking at everything. But yeah, I'll pause there on that, and we can always come back to kind of this discussion. So again, I think I kind of mentioned this as we went. Extra advocacy tips: if you're feeling comfortable in general, really look at those criteria levels, prompting, that they're saying, the accuracy, the prompts, et cetera, that they're saying in the goal. Do you think they're appropriate for that specific goal? When I'm talking about this, I always love to give the example of, if you're working on crossing the street independently, or successfully, take out the word independent. If you're working on crossing the street successfully, you don't want, they cross the street 8 out of 10 times accurately. You need to be able to cross the street successfully 10 out of 10 times. And so we want to make sure that what we're seeing really lines up with a goal, and it's not just cookie cutter. A very common one is, with 85% accuracy. And I do have that on a lot of my goals. I don't want to point out that that's a bad thing, because that is a good thing. If I can get students up to 85% accuracy on a certain goal in a year, that would be great. If it's a very important goal, then maybe the next year I take it that extra level of accuracy and independence maybe with that goal. So again, if you're feeling comfortable, look at those pieces of the goals a little bit more to kind of see if they make sense for that goal, if that makes it a meaningful goal for your child, to increase the accuracy, to decrease the accuracy, maybe work on it in a different prompting way, things like that. So yeah, couple extra advocacy tips in there. Sometimes when I'm handed an IEP and just, will you look over this IEP? I get asked the question a lot, is this a good goal for my child? Which I obviously have my own opinions, but I don't know your child, even though they have Angelman syndrome, and maybe at a conference, we love, playing and running around together. You do know your child best. And so some guiding questions that I usually ask, and some things to consider when reviewing your child's goals that you're seeing with, in the absence of my help or something like that. Knowing your child's rate of progress. Is this a reasonable goal for my child to achieve in a year? Are they saying, oh yeah, we can work on sight words independently, but you're going, yeah, okay, sure, because that's doable in a year. Maybe we only suggest to the team, could we this year, let's work on, with only 2 gestural prompts, something like that. And then maybe we get up to to full independence? Or are they saying, or your child, are they not pushing them hard enough and you think they could be doing it more independently? That's the kind of the other side of the spectrum. Is this goal a skill that really will benefit my child in the long run? Is it something that I want them to be working on? Is it meaningful to them? Are they going to be engaged in this goal? Is the criteria reasonable? Have we written a broad enough goal that it's not just a like certain science word specific thing? Could we be working on core AAC words in our across science, social studies, et cetera? Do we need to broaden the goal? Things like that. Are there goals covering all of my areas of concern? In general, on IEPs, a student accessing modified curriculum is going to need goals in all of these areas: ELA, math, written expression. So I like to call writing written expression, because if you're receiving gross motor, written expression is very different than handwriting and the physical act of writing. So the physical act of writing implies that it's with a pen, and that's how we're working on handwriting. However, written expression is actually how we are formulating our thoughts, putting our thoughts on paper, creating full sentences, using our grammar, things like that. And that can be worked on with communication, with actual writing, with typing, with how we're getting our thoughts out. So just to point that out. So we have ELA, math, written expression, speech and language, fine motor, gross motor, adaptive behavior, social emotional behavior, pre-vocational, or depending on what age, vocational skills if you're older. We don't call them pre-vocational. Now we're getting into high school or vocational skills. Are there goals covering all of those areas if those are areas of concern for you? And just a little note that I have added in here. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. If a goal is repeated for multiple years because a student hasn't met it, it is the responsibility of the school to change something. And this came from recently this year. Oftentimes I get an IEP. If a student is coming up to me, I get an IEP from the previous teacher. And then I think, okay, after doing, we're working on this goal, they are nowhere near meeting this goal. I didn't write this IEP, I inherited it, and I'm required to work on these skills. And I go back and look at their history, and they've had that same reading goal 3 or 4 times. 4 sounds extreme, at least 2 years prior. So like for 3 straight years, they had this 1 or 2 reading goals. Blows my mind. Something needs to be changed in how we're instructing it and how we are expecting them to do this skill. Do we need to change the criteria? Is answering who, what, where, when, why questions from visuals, is that too much information? Should we just focus on who questions for this year? Do we need to pick a different, like that's kind of the example I just gave, pick a different goal that is a precursor skill to this goal because we're nowhere near meeting this one yet. Just something I like to throw out there. Everything is different. I will say with all of the COVID stuff that has happened in the past 1.5 years, I did continue goals and kind of went against this without changing how we're instructing it or any criteria or anything, because I had a student or two that it was a very hard goal to measure during virtual instruction, right? Their parents had opted for them to be accessing virtual instruction. I can't work on them completing the lunch routine independently. I can if the parents are heavily involved. But it was something that was very hard to do in the home environment. And so we did continue. So that's a little bit of a caveat there. But in general, if you're seeing it for multiple years and you disagree with that, here are some ideas that the school team, we got to change something about it because what we're doing isn't working because they're not meeting this goal. So this isn't a meaningful goal to that child. Okay, moving on. General ideas, places to look for goal ideas or guidance, because you guys are parents. You are not an expert in OT, in speech and language, in the reading curriculum going from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. You can look at state standards and district curriculum. Often you will see the sequence of skills, regardless of what the grade level is. Look at the sequence of skills. You can see that they're about here. What's kind of the next steps? Well, maybe you could formulate goal ideas from there to suggest to the team if you're just getting nowhere with their ideas. Formal assessments and programs, certain curriculums that we have access to as teachers, or assessments that they might be doing in the student's triennial IEP, come with skill recommendations. You could ask the IEP team to see them if it's not stated in the evaluation or assessment results. I've seen those printouts myself, and so sometimes they exist, sometimes they don't. Hopefully you have a good enough rapport with them to ask for that. You can search for area specific IEP goal banks online. And so I do just want to point out the ASF website has an IEP goal bank. So big plug for that. I am in charge of, approving and kind of managing the goals. We haven't done a lot on that, but recently, but it's there, it exists. You can go search. I'm always talking with Amanda about how we want to reorganize it, make it easier. You can look for vocational goals, pre-vocational, like literally all of the areas that I mentioned. There's stuff in there if you wanted ideas that have come from other families of kids with Angelman syndrome. You can ask on social media, hey, anybody have a goal idea for this? On Facebook, there's the Angelman Connections group, Angelman Literacy group, or just the ASF group. I will say, you're going to get a ton of responses, whether you like them or not. So it's a lot to weed through. I get very overwhelmed in participating in a lot of the social media, Facebook groups and questions. And so that's just something to consider. Like I said, the ASF website and the IEP Goal Bank. And I am always happy to help throw some ideas out there too. If you need, OT has been working on this goal for 3 years. It's kind of meaningful to me, not really. What else do you think we could be working on? Again, I'm not an OT expert in general, but I have enough experience. I could try to help figure something out. Okay, so it's already 8:45. Oh, I'm on the East Coast, so it's 8:45 my time. I'm hoping we have enough time here. Let's move on to services and supports. Okay, so how instruction towards all the goals that you just decided on, you finally agreed upon with the IT team, how those goals will be provided. So this is actually a harder section to just kind of say, in terms of a presentation, this is what should be happening, because services and supports are so individualized. Even like the student has Angelman syndrome, is not just a blanket statement of they should have a one-on-one aid or they should have this amount of speech services. It's very dependent. There's pros to that, there's cons to that, on where they are at, what their present levels say, what the school environment is like, things like that. Okay, so in general, the services and supports should say in the IEP who will provide what kind of instruction to accomplish the goals, should state where that instruction will be provided. Okay, so are they receiving specialized, California uses the term specialized academic instruction. That's me as a special ed teacher. Is it myself? Is it time in my classroom? Is it aid support in a general education classroom during the gen ed reading block, things like that. I'd just like to point out that there are many service options that exist that provide the least restrictive environment for that student. And so again, that term least restrictive environment is part of the law. However, that can be interpreted in different ways, depending on the school, the student, the parents, etc. That can be interpreted different ways for that student. So some options are, like I just mentioned, are they getting instruction in the special ed setting, in the separate kind of day class setting? Are they getting assistance support in the gen ed setting or in the special education setting? Is there co-teaching happening? I co-taught for a year in Tennessee, did it for a year in California, loved it. It's a little bit more costly for school districts, but this if you have an idea, that's one special education teacher and one general education teacher in a typical classroom for either part or all of a day. Is the services for this child a blend of all the above? During reading, do we need this? During math, we need this, all sorts of things like that. when I am helping parents, or just kind of, based on my experiences as a teacher, as seeing my family, my parents, kind of growing up, seeing them navigate all of Matt's schools and instructional settings, I just really want to ensure that you as the parent are comfortable with each setting that your child will be in, and that it's based on your child's needs. Whether that's full inclusion, great, love it. How do we make it work? Let's do it. Whether that's the special day class setting with a little bit of inclusion, whether that's a separate school because you can tell your child is just thriving there, that's okay. These are all great options. There's so much variability across districts, across states, across schools even, that you as the parent should just feel comfortable with what's happening with your child. Okay, so now probably, I think, one of the most important little parts. We've just got a couple more slides and then we'll all look at the Q&A. So how to get more. So the most frequent question that I'm asked is, how do I get one-on-one aid support? And the other most frequent question is getting a communication device on the IEP. So just in general, this is that how to get more. Do you want more service time? Do you want more speech time? Are you looking for that one-on-one aid? Is there a certain goal you want them to work on that they're just, for some reason, being so opposed to working on, etc.? How to kind of get more, okay? So start by building relationships with that school staff year round, okay? Show them that you are an advocate for your child year round, not just at the annual meeting. So by advocate, I'm not saying be a pushy, advocate that you may be in that, like in terms of the IEP document itself, which is, if you are, that's fine. I'm just saying build that personal connection, because it will help with more meaningful discussions around tough issues when you get to those tough conversations. For example, a couple weeks after, beginning of the school year, things have maybe calmed down, check in with the teacher. Hey, how are things going? How are you doing? How is, I'm noticing Matt doing this at home. Are you seeing the same things at school? So even if that's kind of a contrived situation that you just want to engage the teacher in a little bit more, hey, do you need anything for any upcoming lessons? Or can I help with a certain activity that you guys do on a monthly basis? I don't know, something like that. Hopefully there's newsletters and email communication coming home or when you're picking them up, things like that. When you get to tough discussions, you will have a more meaningful discussion around those tough issues if you have showed the school staff, not just the teacher, other school staff, that you're not there to be a thorn in their side. You are helping them year round. Like, this is, you're part of the team is what we're getting at. You're part of the team year round. And you're going to have more meaningful discussions and people willing to go the extra mile in those discussions if you are building that relationship year round, not just around the tough issues. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing, even if you are totally happy with this team, with everything that's happening in your child's IEP, I still recommend building your record, okay? You will have a better case no matter the request when you have data, when you have progress reports, when you have previous assessments, when you have a paper trail of everything that you're asking, okay? So do build your record throughout the year. Write things down when they happen. If you have, if there's a daily communication notebook, the school probably needs to keep the original, but then you can ask for a copy of it. I've done that for parents. Once we have filled up the notebook, then I have an assistant. We run it through the copier so that everybody has a copy of it, can reference that. Date documents that come home, you get an email from teacher, print them out, put them in a file, or save them in a certain file on your computer, all things like that. Don't try to write everything down prior to, like, right before the IEP meeting as you are looking at, trying to make this request or this, have this tough discussion. You're going to get overwhelmed. It's really hard to remember. Even if you think, oh, I will remember, you're just build your record throughout the year. Even if, again, you think you are things are in a really good place with your child's school, the team, etc. You never know when a new teacher is going to come in, when a new principal starts, or a new superintendent is going to come in and change everything around in that district, when you might have to be doing more advocating. So again, things like progress reports when they come home, look at them. That should be all of your updates on your goals, behavior, notebooks, daily communication notebooks. What else? Conversations with the aide as you are picking up, dropping off, or with the teacher picking up, dropping off. Well, yes, it was an informal conversation, write down the date and the couple of words that were said as soon as you hear them, or can get to a notebook, so that just you have record of it and something that isn't blown out of proportion, or things like that. So those are a couple things to start doing. Okay, when you are preparing for a certain request, when you are in the process of those IEP meetings, I know it's hard. Do your best to state your concerns calmly and objectively. And this is hard. I am emotional too as I'm advocating for my students. I'm not saying crying or emotion is not okay. Just do your best to kind of word it calmly and objectively, even if you are feeling really emotional about it, which is often where having an advocate there, if you're really in that spot, an advocate can help with that too. During tough discussions, keep the focus in terms of your child's needs, because that will keep the discussion productive. So things that you don't want to be constantly saying are, the school should provide the one-on-one aid, or no, I want this, I want this, I want this for the student or for my child. You are going to, if you keep it in focus of, here's all the data that we have, here's the paper trail, the IEPs, the progress reports, etc. It's showing that the student needs this and this or this. What can we do to get them this, and this, and this? Okay. So what I just said, so use the data from the record that you've been building throughout the year to support your claims about your child's needs. Okay, I have a couple examples in wording. I don't normally like to put this much wording on slides, but if you wanted to take pictures of it just for examples. Also, I don't think I said this at the beginning, I'm happy to share these slides or all of the text with anybody that wants it. So don't feel like you have to have all this memorized or take pictures of it right now. So for example, the behavior data sheet that you send home every day that I've made copies of, or that we agreed to, you'd copy, so I have the copies. The behavior data sheet shows that my child keeps showing more aggressive behaviors during math center times. It's clear then that more support or an instructional change is needed during math centers. Okay, that's just an example of how you could word this. I'm going to go to the next slide. Two other examples. I'm seeing on the past 3 progress reports that little or no progress has been made on the peer interaction goal, and the assessment data at her reevaluation demonstrated that was a big area of deficit. We all had the conversation about how we're not, peer interaction is a struggle for us. How can we work together to create more peer interaction opportunities and to help my daughter be more successful when those opportunities occur so that she makes more progress on this goal? Okay, if you look at that last question, how can we work together to create more peer interaction opportunities and to help my daughter be more successful when those opportunities occur? That's saying, I want more inclusion time. But I'm asking it as, let's work together here. How can we create more peer interaction opportunities? As a parent, do I have those? Do I have the ability to go into your school and say, during recess, we're going to do this. And then during inclusion, when we're doing science centers, we're going to do this. No, but you're phrasing it as, how can we work together to create more peer interaction opportunities and to help her be more successful when they occur so that she makes more progress on that goal? Okay, one more example. I closed the Q&A. I see questions are popping up. I've got 2 more slides and then I'll come back to them. I think it's 2. Okay, So another example, at previous meetings, you've explained that the ratio of staff to students in the classroom is 1 to 3. That's kind of an average. Usually in my classrooms, it's about 1 to 2. So that's 1 staff for every 2 students. And I often rotate students around. Again, I'm in a special day class setting. I have 2 students at one table with either myself or an instructional assistant, so with an adult at a time. And that's how they rotate around. I do very little whole group because I don't find that to be effective a lot of the times. Anyways, at previous meetings, you've explained that the ratio of staff to students in the classroom is 1 to 3. The report card, progress report, in conversations with Ms. Martin, I'm aware, again, I'm pretending to be the parent, I'm aware that there's minimal progress being made on the reading and math goals that we've been working on with this given ratio. So here's your questions for discussion with the team. What does the instruction look like during this time? What prompting methods are being used? So again, not initially proposing or asking the questions in an accusatory way, being adversarial. This is just kind of your initial discussions with them. What does instruction look like during this time so that you can be a more informed member of the IEP team? You can understand a little bit more what's happening, what it looks like in there, what prompting methods are being used, what curriculum exactly are you using, things like that. Then depending on the answers to those questions, the discussion you're having, then you refer back to, well, the report card, progress report, et cetera, everything that I'm seeing. Clearly a one-on-one ratio is warranted during this time because we're not making progress with this ratio, with this curriculum, with this instructional method. Let's change something, right? So you didn't start by saying, no, they clearly need a one-on-one aid. You're looking at your data, your record, et cetera, and having those conversations in that way. Okay. Okay, a quick note about one-on-one aids, because again, I said that is, I am asked that question most frequently. Adding one-on-one aid support to a student's IEP is one of the most restrictive supports that you can have. In legality, that is a reason that schools are often hesitant to just jump on board with that. Yes, it happens to be pretty costly, but it also is a very restrictive support to put on a student's IEP. And I point this out not because I am opposed to one-on-one support, but because it's just a lot. There are a lot of things that go into making that decision that I want parents to be aware of, instead of thinking that just, yes, one-on-one support is what they need. So questions to think about. If you come to me, these are some of the questions that you kind of, that we talk about so that we can formulate a good, proposal to the IEP team, things like that. What is the current setting and the student to staff ratio? Are there more instructional assistants in the classroom that you didn't realize? So it really is a 1 to 2 ratio. Or I have a couple students that as the teacher, they work best in 1-to-1 ratio during certain times, or basically during reading and math. And so even though it's not on their IEP, I structure the classroom, because these other 3 can work in a group better. I structure the classroom so that this student has one-on-one support during certain times, because that's how they learn best. And so this is a very individual how I structure my classroom, but basically I'm pointing out, is that happening and you're just not realizing it yet, or something like that. Once you are aware of the current setting, ratio, et cetera, what about that is not working? And how do you know it's not working? Again, here's building your record, getting it kind of on paper somewhere that, is behavior increasing, are goals not being met, et cetera. Is there a different support we could put into place that would address this concern? So if it's just during a certain time, visuals, structure, routine, do we need to be working on that more to help increase independence so that we don't need that, so that we don't become reliant on one-on-one support? Peer supports are definitely an underutilized strategy in the school setting. Do we need to direct instruction and practice of a skill at a certain time, and then plan for generalizing that skill to the lunchroom so that we can be more independent during lunchtime? I'm speeding through this a little bit because I know I'm running out of time. Do we need to make different, like I just talked about, purposeful and different student pairing or groups during certain activities to help get different kind of instruction for students, etc. Okay, I am going to pause there and check. As long as we're okay. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so I'm checking Q&A. I see a lot from Marilyn. Marilyn's asking, what can I do to advocate for my 21-year-old daughter as she exits the school district in regards to AAC learning, social therapy, etc. Okay, for that first question, that is a whole other can of worms. Again, my brother's 26. His day program, COVID is a whole other thing. Hold off and repeat that you did COVID. Okay, so to get to the first question, how can you advocate for your daughter? She's exiting. Adult services are definitely not perfect and often lacking. I don't have good answers to that in terms of do your research on programs that are available. If you're not comfortable with a certain program, adult program, advocate, for a different one, and make sure. I think maybe one of the best things that I could suggest would be to make sure that you have a good understanding of what successes you are seeing in the school setting, so that yes, there's often transition from school to the adult programs, where they will communicate and there's a little bit of overlap, but you as the parent are always going to be there. So if you understand what was working in the school system, then you might be able to help mimic it in the adult program in terms of exiting the school district. So then next question was, anything legal that we can use to have a student exiting the school system at age 21 that you can request to hold off and repeat that year due to COVID? That is out of my realm. I would suggest an advocate. I honestly have no idea. COVID, like this whole, last year being virtual for a lot of people was very new, and I don't know what the legalities are going to be with, can they do an extra year in the school-based, age, basically, instead of going until 21, can they go to 22? It actually is 22 in a lot of states. Instead of going until 22, can they go to 23? That would be get an advocate involved, ask the school system that. That's going to be very dependent on the individual district. And if you can show that they didn't make progress on goals, very likely, because we were all, at home for a while, you might have more basis for the request, but that's a little bit out of my realm. And then Marilyn also asked, how often is best to have IEP meetings? The legal requirement is once a year. So at the very least, you'll have once a year where you will have the annual meeting and decide on all of the goals. If you as the parent can request an IEP meeting at any time. Even if you don't change anything in the IEP, you can put it on record, a certain request. You can talk about a certain goal or something like that. You can call an IEP meeting at any time. So I don't think, if you're having a lot of issues, again, you can have conversations with the teacher and therapists and staff outside of an IEP meeting. If you want something on record, I would suggest asking for an actual IEP meeting, but you can call one whenever you want to. And I don't think there's necessarily a best practice for like how often to have them. The legal requirement is once a year. If everything's going well and you're okay with, checking in, I checking in with the school team, via email and things like that, just kind of keep that record. And I don't think you need to call multiple meetings. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Is there a legal term that will assist for exiting adults to continuous services after leaving the school district? I'm not quite sure what the question is. There's not necessarily a legal term. It's this. So the school system is required to provide services until the individual is age 21 or 22, and then adult services takes over, and it's out of the school district's hands. Is there a legal term? Yeah, there's not just one legal term for it. It's kind of, I think that's kind of just what we refer to as exiting, a transition age is basically high school, end of high school, transitioning to adult services. So that's the last question in here. My email is up on here. Again, it's mnharvey16@gmail.com. If anybody has more individual questions, situations you want to talk about, I can look over IEPs. Again, the school year for me starts in 2 weeks, and I'm a little bit crazy busy right now trying to get everything prepped for that. Once I will have a little bit more time after that, that time period, but feel free to reach out. We can start a conversation. I can look over things, or in the future, my email address is not going to change. I am around, and shameless plug for the siblings panel that's happening in a couple hours. I will be a part of that with a couple other, I think, adult siblings. I'm going to stop my screen share and check on the time. Yeah, we have just a couple minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to pop them in. And I think that's everything that I have. Thank you all so much for attending. And I wish you the best as you go into this school year. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.